Hello, this is Matthew Ogden. I would like to welcome everybody watching to the webcast for April 12th, 2013. This is part of our regular Friday evening webcast series on LaRouchepack.com, and we will be joined by Mr. LaRouche today. We're on the eve of a very historic conference, which is coming up in Europe over this weekend, and for that reason, Mr. LaRouche will be joining us from Frankfurt, Germany today. He is connected over video, and we will be posing questions to him from here. Now, I assume that, Mr. LaRouche, you have some opening remarks that you would like to deliver. I'd like to hand it over to you for those opening statements.
Well, I'm back in Germany again. We will be speaking from Frankfurt to you, and we will have the usual routine, I understand, that we will have two people posing questions to me. And I think probably the best thing to do right now is, having said that much, is let them start questioning me now.
All right, I will present the first question to you. And as most people know, this week President Obama unleashed his budget for 2014 and signed that budget. And at this point, there's a large number of leading Democrats, also liberal organizations, who are enraged at what Barack Obama just did with this budget. Just to give people a bit of a sense, on top of the $2.5 trillion sequester, the Obama budget has $1.8 trillion in additional cuts. It also allows for the lowest level of discretionary spending since the 2004 budget. And in this document, he references the savings that he's going to that are going to go through, which include $400 billion in cuts to medical treatment as a result of the Obamacare so-called reforms, and reforms to Medicare, which is going to make treatment and any kind of medical care a lot more difficult for people who are the most poorly off in the United States. There's $230 billion in cuts as a result to Social Security. Obama has done the unthinkable. He has touched what some people call the third rail of politics, which, as a Democratic president, and made the cuts to Social Security. $230 billion in so-called savings through the enactment of the chained CPI. There's also $200 billion in cuts to farm subsidies. And all of these are being presented by Obama as savings. And all of these are under his budget. It's not, as he claims, the Republicans made me do it. This is his program. And so in this context of the announcement of the budget, what we've gotten in D.C. as responses from leading Democrats, which I think you've been briefed on, Lynn, is that it's the understanding that among these Democrats, that what you've said about Barack Obama as a genocidalist, that is entirely the case. The budget spells it out. Now, this is also what we're getting at the state level, where we go in to organize in the state houses to put through Glass-Steagall, to pass the Glass-Steagall resolutions, and there is a recognition among the legislators at the state level that implementing the cuts that they're being asked to implement as states, on top of what's coming down from the federal government, it means that they're being asked to implement genocide. Now, what some of the organizers on the ground have reported is that these state leaders do represent the 5%. That they're not simply your run-of-the-mill populist which makes up a large portion of our population, who is ready to scream and cry and buy a gun, basically. But these legislators are looking for solutions. They recognize that they've been tasked to make law and to enact solutions that don't involve genocide. So without going into further details about the cuts that are coming down just at the state level, because this has been ongoing since the outset of the financial breakdown crisis, I'd like to ask you a question that's actually come in from a number of people into the info LaRouche pack at Gmail inbox, and with the recognition among a growing portion of the American people and the American leadership that Obama's policy represents genocide, is a policy of genocide. First of all, what comes next after that recognition? And then the real question is, how do you personally make the leap from Obama's policy of genocide to assigning that policy to the Queen of England?
Well, first of all, Obama was always only a tool of the British monarchy. For example, you look at his campaign against, our other Democratic candidate. But you look at his campaign, it was financed exactly by the drug interests and similar interests on the border of the United States. He is a British agent. He is nothing but a British agent. His policies are those of the Queen of England, and people have just seen it most clearly in terms of the results of this most recent statement, that he is moving for a reduction of the population of the United States, a rapid reduction of the population of the United States, because that's the effect of these cuts, if they go through. On the other hand, you see a great number of the American population which has quite a different view. There's the greatest revolt against this president, including that he or his predecessor or immediate predecessor has experienced. He is not a popular president anymore. He is going to get a big resistance. Whether that resistance will be successful or not is a question. But what we're seeing is an accumulated rate, an accelerating rate of resistance against this president and his policies. We may also say that the hatred against him for his policies is reaching a high point now. So we're going to have to see how that is. But from our own standpoint, from our own process of organizing, we have had the highest rate of acceleration of support for our opposition to this president that I think has been on record. And it will probably increase considerably. There is no doubt that this president is in deep trouble right now. And I think that's the way you have to look at it. First of all, this president is really a stooge of the British monarchy. The policies of genocide which he's proposing are those of the British Queen, Her Majesty the Queen. This cannot be concealed from the people. If this is a fact, it's obvious to them. And we're going to find that Glass-Steagall, which is already becoming increasingly popular for immediate voting, may succeed. If it does, he's out.
Well, on that note, this week has really seen some of the most rapid expansion of the LaRouche PAC-led and LaRouche PAC catalyzed support for Glass-Steagall in the United States, especially on the state level. The highlight of this week was the key breakthrough that was made in the state of Maine, where the Maine House of Representatives followed the Maine State Senate to pass unanimously the resolution in support of the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, making Maine the second state to have officially endorsed this resolution, calling on Congress to restore Glass-Steagall, following South Dakota, which occurred a few weeks ago. But on top of that, there are a total of 15 states from all across the country that have official resolutions introduced into their state assemblies. That's Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Kentucky, Virginia, Washington State, Montana, Rhode Island, Hawaii, Minnesota, and most recently North Carolina, which, as people know, is the home of Congressman Walter Jones, who is the primary Republican co-sponsor in the House of the Marcy Kaptur H.R. 129. The expansion of the co-sponsors on the House bill has also occurred. The total is now up to 52, with 6 more added just at the beginning of this week. There still is a jam-up in the Senate. There is yet to be a companion bill in the United States Senate for H.R. 129. But it is very substantial what the LaRouche PAC has been able to do to mobilize the states across the country to create a juggernaut for Glass-Steagall. My question for you, Lynn, from your vantage point there in Germany, is what are the implications of our campaign here in the United States for Glass-Steagall and the breakthroughs that we are making on the people and the nations of Europe?
Well, first of all, Europe is pretty much, in terms of Western and Central Europe, is pretty much, at this point, a lost cause. The British have dominate the whole picture internationally. This is not new. France has no opposition of any significance to this process. You have great resentment in Spain, in Portugal, in Greece in particular, in Italy, so that and throughout the rest of Europe generally. But the resistance is not, shall we say, effective yet. If we in the United States continue the pattern on the state level in the United States on the issue of the Obama killer policy, and remember that this is a killer policy, and it's now clear to more and more people in the United States, particularly with this speech by the president, that this is a deliberate mass murder of the population. Now, if you want to get a read on that, what the people of the United States are getting is they're being told that by the British policy, which is Obama's policy, which he has just declared publicly, is to reduce the population of the United States. And it's what the British Queen has said, that the reduction must be of the human population from a present level of 7 billion people to about 1. And that is what she is pushing now, and that is the genesis of the policy of this president. Now, the very fact that the American people are being faced with evidence and reports that the Queen is running Obama, and it's the Queen's policy which Obama has just declared. It's a policy of introducing accelerated rates of genocide against the U.S. population itself. And that's going to become clear. And I think, our Americans are not quite as stupid as some people would hope they were. They know what's happening to them. More and more of them. This is going to be a revolt against Obama. And I think that Mr. Nixon's fate is something which is a good model for Obama to follow.
Okay, well, I'd like to call people's attention to a certain event that happened this week, which is the timely passing of Margaret Thatcher. Some might say overdue, overripe, other things. But Margaret Thatcher is no more. And it seems she had an interesting burial, which is she's taken up the traditional funeral pyre, but the funeral pyre is the entirety of the Eurozone. So that is the mass that she is being interred on. So with the passing of Margaret Thatcher, it has the coincidence with the passing of the universal banking system, the system that was ushered in with the Big Bang in 1986, which led to the repeal of Glass-Steagall in the United States, which led to the repeal of various regulations throughout this planet, which were of a similar character to Glass-Steagall. And we've gotten a number of questions in from one question came in from a congressional office who we ran into an aide during a deployment in Washington, D.C. the other day, on more specifics of how we're actually going to unwind the banks, the large institutions that were built up in the course of the shift to universal banking. We've also received similar questions from community bankers in a number of the state houses. For example, in Minnesota, we are being asked specifically to garner the support of the local community banks, so that when these representatives, who are representatives, they're not bankers, some may be, when they're asked the hard questions, what do you do with these big Wall Street banks? What do you do with these institutions that are spilling over state borders, over national borders? How are you going to unwind them? How are you going to resolve them? So we're being asked these specific questions, which do reflect greater seriousness in how we're going to implement the policy of Glass-Steagall. And so I would like you to take up that question, but I'd also like you to address an axiom that often comes up, which is part of, among other things, the report co-authored by the FDIC and the Bank of England, which chooses winners and losers. This is often something that comes up when you're speaking to conservatives, that in the free market, conversely, in a democracy, one cannot choose winners and losers. One can't say that one institution must go under and another must survive. So there is still some of that call it democratic thinking, call it conservative thinking, that free market thinking, that you cannot tell certain institutions you must go bankrupt or you must be cut off from government support. So it's really a two-part question. How do you address these underlying axioms, and how are we going to unwind these institutions? How are we going to resolve these institutions?
Well, the answer is rather elementary from the standpoint of the U.S. federal Constitution. Our nation is not a nation based on some kind of popularity opinion. We have the question of popularity of opinions, but our institutions are based on the principle of the Constitution. And the most crucial part of that Constitution, which was the most essential, was Alexander Hamilton's prescription on the nature of law. Until the Hamilton principle was understood by those who framed the Constitution, we did not have a government, a functioning government. It was only with the success of Hamilton's institution that the United States came into existence. And that continued until, well, actually, Jefferson, who made a mess of things. And we had a worse mess of things was made by Andrew Jackson and people like him. We've also had Obama is the worst president and the most un-United States president, the greatest enemy of the United States and its tradition so far is the current president, Obama. So our law is clear. Our law is not based on an opinion. It's based on a scientific finding of principle, which was established under George Washington and made clear not only by Alexander Hamilton, but by John Quincy Adams, for example, or Monroe, and also by our great president, Roosevelt. These were principles. These are not popularity contests. These are principle bases for government. Now, we have admittedly taken a bunch of bums into the presidential institution. But usually we have survived so far by dumping those bums or dumping their policies and replacing them by presidents who are and other people who are more reliable. The way to answer this question now, we in the United States are based on a constitutional principle which included very significantly the teachings of Alexander Hamilton. Now, the only way the United States is going to survive this, and the only way that anybody in Europe who chooses to survive will survive, is by copying the United States Constitution on this point, particularly on economic points. So therefore, we must kick out of office, or from any effective influence in office. In the United States, we must kick out anyone that tries to turn us now against the original Constitution. And that must be exactly what Roosevelt tried to do. He didn't do the whole job, but he did pretty much a pretty good job. We had others who have tried to do it. But now the question, the survival of the United States as a republic and the survival of civilization globally depend upon the actions of the United States immediately to throw this bum, the current president, out of office for his offenses against the Constitution. The time has come to do that. If the United States does not have the guts to throw this bum out of office, and he certainly has created all the bases for having his expulsion from office, Nixon was actually a soft touch compared to this guy. He's an agent of a foreign power which is determined to destroy us. And therefore, all patriots will now rally to save not only their republic, but to save their own butts.
Well, we have a question which has come in from some institutional circles in Washington, D.C., who want Mr. LaRouche's assessment of the implications of Obama's cuts to NASA in his FY 2014 budget. Before I pose the question, let me just give a little bit of background so people can know where things stand on this front. On Wednesday, April 10th of this week, there was the second congressional hearing in the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee on threats from space, on asteroid threats, and so forth. This was the second of these hearings in the House. There was also a similar hearing in the Senate. And although many of the basic aspects of the question were addressed and there was an interesting discussion, what was alarming was what was not discussed, what was not addressed. And perhaps most conspicuously, as was noticed by the people that we had on the ground at this hearing, was the fact that there was no recognition of the Russian proposal for a joint strategic defense of Earth. Although, for now over 2 years, since the fall of 2011, you've had high-level Russian officials proposing this sort of strategic cooperation with the United States on both the issues of missile defense and on planetary defense. Defending the Earth from asteroids and comets that come from outer space. This has come from a whole array of top officials from Russia, from the security community to the Duma, to the military, and to the diplomatic corps. And yet there has been no official recognition of these proposals by anybody in Congress or anybody in official positions in the United States, for that matter, on record to this date. Now, in Obama's 2014 budget proposal, the item which is grabbing headlines is his proposal, his plan to go out, grab a tiny little asteroid, something not even the size of what came in to hit Chelyabinsk, and to somehow bring it into orbit around the moon. Now, this is not new. There have been proposals for this that have been put out in the past. This idea might be novel, but it is in no way adequate, especially when taken in light of the rest of what Obama has actually done to NASA. Obama has decimated the manned space program, pushing back further the date in which we can have an American launch vehicle which can take Americans to the International Space Station. NASA's budget is way underfunded, even for what it's being asked to do. And the number of Earth-observing satellites is expected to collapse by a shocking 75% by the end of this decade under Obama's policy. So, in fact, Obama is presiding over the destruction of not only the United States, but the threat to the existence to the entire human race, which has been a theme of this webcast. Contrary to that, as you've stated, Mr. LaRouche, what in fact needs to be done is for mankind to move as a species to take increasing amounts of the entire territory of the inner solar system under our direct control as a single unified space, as a volume between between Venus and Mars orbit taken as a whole. So in light of that background, the question that has come in from institutional circles in the United States to you is, what are the implications of the further cuts to NASA under the Obama budget plan for the survival of the human race?
That's a good question. And the question is, do we have the leadership and the leadership with the guts to throw this guy out of office? Because what he's doing, his entire policy, is based on the policy set forth by the British Queen. Her policy, as stated, which is his policy, is the reduction of the population of the human species from an estimated 7 billion persons to the order of approximately 1 billion persons. The policy of this president is precisely in that direction. He may not have said exactly what the Queen said, but he has spoken in that direction. And that's where his hands are moving and his feet are walking. And therefore, the question that faces us is this president has prevented all of those actions, insofar as he's capable, all of those actions which are necessary to protect the United States and to protect the people of the planet. We have to recognize we don't have good figures on this because our research is not that good in terms of what our governments have been able to do. But we know that the rate of threat, of danger, to the existence of the human species is increasing. And unless we do something about that, there's not going to be probably no human species. We have no defense whatsoever. We have no competent defense. We could not, right now, if we had to face a major, something hitting the Earth, really destructive, we couldn't do it. We couldn't stop that within a year's time. If we had a year's time to do it, we couldn't do it. You could have the extinction of the United States. I'm not saying it's going to happen that way, but I'm saying now we are defenseless, that we could not defend the United States against a major blow from that source within 1 year's time, if we had a 1 year notice. So therefore, the time has come where everything that this president stands for is either evil, bad, or stupid. And you can take out your choice as you choose. The American people are going to have to realize that if they want to save their nation, they're going to have to dispense with the continued services of this president. And he's giving them all the reasons in the world to love to do that to them.
All right. Well, our final question tonight is on the situation unleashed by the Bank of Japan and the decision to double the money supply for Japan. Something that we've covered this on the website with the recent interview with Mike Billington, and as our viewers who have seen that presentation understand, it is a complex situation, but there seems to be an assumption within leaders of the Japanese government that somehow they can manage or control the quantitative easing policy somehow to the benefit of Japan, based on partially on past experience in the 1990s, and also based in my view at least, and what Mike Billington presented, a misunderstanding of the role of Japan within the current global context. And as it was discussed in that video, that global context not only involves providing the further liquidity to reinflate the economy, as many in the West have been hoping and drooling over, really, but also the current role of Japan in the Obama policy of for the encirclement of China, as Mike went through. They are currently acting with the United States in setting up a radar system that would be part of the BMD defense system for Asia. And the further context is not only the continued deteriorating situation in the Middle East, which is accelerating, and if you want to talk about a genocidal policy coming from this president, you really need look no further than what has happened in the Middle East over his presidency. But within the region of the Pacific, you have incredible and unrelenting saber rattling on the Korean Peninsula. And while many in the United States and in other parts of the world have put out the call to chill the situation, to calm down the rhetoric, and to put an end to military exercises that could potentially create that could be the trigger for an incident, a misunderstanding. Still, this situation is escalating. So, if you could address this very involved situation that it involves both the monetary policy of the West as well as the war policy that we've seen coming from the West and from Obama in particular. So if you could put that in perspective.
Well, first of all, you've got to realize that sometimes when you get threats like that out, that you have to question, is the threat really that important? Is it that serious? Is it going to be actually delivered as a result? And there are reasons for this. But there is a case, of course, the famous history, that when the British monarchy succeeded in getting Bismarck out of the position of Chancellor in 1890, the immediate first effect was that the process leading into the new war involving Japan allied with Britain. And this war process continued all the way through the end of World War II, as we called it. And we had hoped that the Japan would have learned the lesson, as many in Japan said they had, as particularly in terms with their relationship to General MacArthur when he was in charge of this peacemaking operation earlier. So first of all, we have to put a question mark as to whether this threat is really deliverable in any significant way. And I don't think we want to jump to conclusions to assume that Japan is going to do that, move in that direction. First of all, there are political forces in Japan which may operate and may overturn that policy. We have a very curious situation in terms of the Korean situation. It's very ambiguous. China is now forced to react in a sense to the posture that this represents. I think the thing we have to do, and rather than trying to defeat a specific threat of that proposed type, we have to say that if the United States were to dump Obama now, and the citizens of the United States have excellent reasons which Obama has just presented them in terms of his latest address, to dump him. He has committed crimes. They could be called crimes. It's adequate basis for his impeachment for what he's done. He's proposed a policy which coincides with the British policy of mass increases of death rates of American people. That's what his budget cut means. He's going to kill a great number of Americans if he carries that program out. I think that's sufficient evidence for his expulsion from office. So I think the way we have to look at this is, rather than trying to say, how are we going to cope with these threats of various types, dangers and so forth, forget that. Let's make sure they don't happen. And when the time comes to deal with a threat, like someone in Japan wants to get in a direction with the conflicts with China, that's a stupid thing for anyone in Japan to even think about, because that would be the extinction of Japan if they actually started it. I mean, China's weapons systems and so forth, you want to start a war there? What kind of a nut are you? I don't think the Japan people want that kind of thing. And I think we should not overemphasize the fact that there are threats, and they are threats. They are threats coming from sources, known sources. How far, how successful those threats could be is undetermined. We do have to worry about it in the sense of making sure we're taking precautions to avoid these kinds of threats. But I don't think we should get too sucked into this kind of thing. What we have to do is one job. We have to dump this president of the United States from its office now, and then the shock that this presidency has given to the American people, who had illusions about this president for a long time on his last term in office. I think dump this guy and go with Glass-Steagall immediately is the most popular thing going right now in the United States, is Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall would save the United States and would set a precedent for rescuing Europe and other places as well. I think that's the view we should take. Don't just react to threats. React to what might be made possible by carefully thinking and dedicated people.
Well, thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing reports from what's coming up this weekend over where you are, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again in this context next week. So thank you, Leandra, for joining me today, and thank you all for watching. Signing off.